Okay, this video is going to be on the integumentary system, and you can kind of see here the integumentary system consists of more than just skin. It's going to consist of skin, hair, nails, sweat glands, and also oil or sebaceous glands that are going to be found in the skin. Most people think of the skin as just the outside of what you see, and that's not 100% true. The skin consists mostly of two regions. They are going to be the epidermis, which is what you can see on the outside of people. And as this book suggests, it is made of epithelial tissue. Specifically, it is going to be stratified squamous epithelium, and it is avascular, meaning it does not have a blood supply. So how does it get its nutrition? It's going to get its nutrition from the layer that's underneath it, which is the dermis. The dermis, and we'll show you a picture of what that's going to be, lies underneath or deep to the epidermis. It consists mostly of fibrous connective tissue, and it is vascular, meaning if you had a splinter and it goes into your epidermis sideways, it may not bleed, but it hurts because your epidermis does have the ability to sense pain, but it's not going to bleed until it gets down into the dermis, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. Underneath the epidermis is the hypodermis. Although it is not actually a distinct region of the skin, it is your superficial fascia, or it is the subcutaneous layer of deep to your skin. So although it's not part of the skin, it shares some of the same functions. Most adipose tissue that is in your skin will absorb some shock, and it's going to insulate you. In addition to that, it's going to anchor your skin, that means the epidermis and the dermis, to the underlying muscles. Here's what it looks like in a picture, and this is the picture that we'll be using when we go through the practical. You'll notice that the epidermis is just this thin little layer here. But there's going to be 5 distinct portions to it, and we'll go through that. So we'll cover most of what we're talking about as the epidermis. So this portion here is all made of stratified squamous epithelium. And if you got a splinter going into here, you wouldn't bleed. It isn't going to bleed until you get below the epidermis, which is going to be this area to here, which has within it, you can see the blood vessels and stuff. But there'll be a few things in the dermis that are important for you as skin. And some of them that I'll just kind of point out is going to be this one here. The squiggly little line here is called the eccrine or merocrine sweat gland. So this is going to be, its secretions are going to work its way up to the pores that are on the surface of your skin, and its purpose is to regulate temperature. So if you get really hot, you are going to have a sheen of sweat on your skin, and any little movement is going to cause you to have convection cooling so that you will cool down. The other thing that's going to be there, and it's usually next to a hair shaft or the gland at the bottom or hair follicle, is going to be the sebaceous or oil glands. So all hair follicles will have them. And what they're going to do is lubricate the shaft of the hair. And basically that's it. It'll give your hair some softness, and it is going to be able to secrete its secretions along the hair follicle up to the shaft. And if you have oily hair, that's probably where it came from. Another thing that you'd find in this dermis layer is going to be these things here. They are called the erector pili, and when they contract, because it is a smooth muscle, it is going to pull it towards the surface of your epidermis, and it's going to make your hairs stand on edge. So for a lot of people, if you're scared, you will have your hairs standing up on the surface of your skin. Or if you're a cat, and a cat might be having a dog chasing it, a cat will make itself look bigger by having all of the hairs along its neck stand up. It really doesn't affect the dog at all, but it's going to at least give the appearance of being a larger animal. So basically the erector pili is going to have your hairs stand on edge. In addition to that, you can see the blood vessels that would be in the reticular layer of the dermis. And that's, like I said, if you get a splinter and it goes to here, it may not bleed, but it might hurt because you will have pain sensation. But as soon as it goes below that, and you have just one little trickle of blood coming out on the surface of your skin, you have pierced the epidermis and you've gone into the dermis. The other thing that you can see on this model here is the layer that's underneath the dermis. And of course, that means in anatomy, hypodermis. So below the dermis is going to be this area right here, which is mostly going to be made of adipose connective tissue. And it's going to insulate your body. So if you are getting older, you are going to lose that subcutaneous fat, and that's why some elderly person might be cold all the time. So what we're going to do is concentrate on the epidermis for most of the questions for any practical, and let me just go over them. So the layers of the epidermis are 5 if you have thick skin. So there is a difference between thick versus thin skin. And this would be the most bottom layer, and then it's going to work its way towards the surface of the skin. So the difference between thick skin versus thin skin is thin skin would have 4 layers and thick skin would have 1 additional layer, and that would be the stratum lucidum, which is found only in thick skin. So think of this, if a skin cell begins at the basal layer, the stratum, all stratum means is just a layer. So think of it as a lasagna. You're gonna have a base, and then you're gonna have a layer of ricotta cheese and then meat or something else. It's layer, 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 layer. But if you're a skin cell, you start out in the stratum basal layer or basale, and your whole life cycle is to work your way up to the surface, and then somewhere in here you're gonna die. The surface of your epidermis, the stratum corneum, is going to be dead skin cells. So let me just go through some of these layers. So the basal layer is the deepest layer. It is going to be right on top of the dermis. And because of this, it's going to have the ability to regenerate. So the basal layer is only a single row of stem cells, which are mitotic, meaning they're going to produce. So every one cell will produce 2 daughter cells. And its purpose is to reach the surface, and as it reaches towards the surface, its life cycle is to die. And so once it reaches that surface, it is due to an active mitosis, which is a cell splitting. Most of this layer is going to be composed of melanocytes, and so depending on the layer of melanocytes that you have, you can have skin like mine, which is all white and blotchy and stuff like that, or you can have African skin, which would be kind of a mocha color or even darker than that. All it means is it's your amount of melanocytes that are going to be found in this basal layer. The purpose of the melanocytes is to protect you against ultraviolet light. So as we go from the bottom and work our way towards the surface, the next layer is called the stratum spinosum. It is kind of prickly or spiny-like, but it's only in the preparation of a fixed slide that it looks like that. So at this particular point, the skin cells are still alive, but their next step is to work towards being dead. So they are going to have in the stratum spinosum keratinocytes that are going to cause them to look spiky so that they kind of look like prickle cells. They're going to look prickly for all practical purposes. The next layer, remember we're working on dying, is going to be the stratum granulosum. And they call it that because it's a granular layer. So if you're looking at a slide of it, it looks a little bit darker or granular. At this particular point, the cells that were alive at the basal layer are in the process of dying. So by dying, what that means, the cells start to flatten, the nucleus and the organelles will start to disintegrate. And at this particular point, any point above this, the cells are going to be dead. So this is the layer where some of them are still alive, some of them are going to be dying. And the reason for that is they're too far from the dermal capillaries to survive. So although they don't have a nutrition themselves, they are going to get it from the dermis. So at this particular point, although the organelles are disintegrating and the nuclei are disappearing, you are using it to become a water-resistant glycolipid that will slow water loss. So at this particular point, they are still alive, but they are in the process of dying. So this next layer is only found in thick skin. The only place that you're going to find thick skin by this definition is the palms of your hand and the soles of your feet. So if you have a callus someplace, that is not an extra layer of skin, it's just a thickened stratum corneum layer, and it's going to lie superficial to the stratum granulosum. Remember, this layer is where they're starting to die. Anything going towards the surface of your skin is now going to be dead. So as it says here, it's found only in thick skin, and this is only going to be 2 or 3 rows of clear, flat, dead keratin sites. So basically, they've died at this particular layer. The layer before that, they're in the process of dying. Stratum corneum, they used to refer to it as the horny layer. It is going to be 20 or 30 rows of flat, anucleated, when it doesn't have a nucleus, that's pretty much dead, keratinized dead cells. That accounts for 3/4 of your epidermal thickness. Although these cells are dead, they still function to protect the deeper cells from your environment. They're going to prevent against water loss. They're going to protect against abrasion and penetration. Does that mean if you fall, you can't puncture through it? Nope, not at all. And also, there's a lot of things that can penetrate through it. A splinter is a good example. Poison ivy is a good example. It can actually penetrate through the stratum corneum. And if you are allergic to poison ivy, you know the bad effects of that. So it's going to act as a barrier against biological, chemical, and physical assaults. Is it perfect? No, but it's better than not having it at all. So this stratum corneum layer is going to be the layer that's protecting you the most. And basically, it has come from this basal layer. It was one of those cells that was born, and then as it works into the spinosum layer, and then into the granulosum layer, this is the layer where some are alive and some are dead, or they're in the process of dying because they're too far away from the dermal capillaries. Once you get to thick skin like the palms of your hands or the soles of your feet, they are truly dead skin cells because they're too far away to get any nutrients from the dermal layer. And then finally, once you see on your skin is the stratum corneum, and it is made of stratified squamous epithelium, and that is going to be what is protecting the underlying tissue from the evil outside world. So the way that this happens is, and I always think of this, the dead skin cells will slough off as dandruff and dander, and the human skin will shed about 5,000 cells every minute. 50,000. We missed it by 10. That's a lot of skin cells. So although it depends on the time of the year, if you look through your window in your house at about December, this light is coming in horizontal. And if you look at the light coming in through the window, you can kind of see in the light skin cells. And so what people think of as what's floating in that is usually dead skin cells, which is gross if you think about it. If you have a dog, you're gonna have a lot of dog fur too. So here is what they show us this. So the stratum corneum is this big layer. This is all stratified squamous epithelium. Then we're gonna get to the granular layer, which is this called the stratum granulosum. This one obviously is not a thick skin because there would be a layer right about here, which would be the stratum lucidum. Then as we're working down to where it would be first born, which is going to be the stratum basale, this spiky layer, or the stratum spinosum, is several layers of keratinocytes. And remember, you were born here, you're kind of dying, you're starting to die at the granulosum, and now anything above that, you're dead. So when you finally get up to the stratum corneum, it is all dead skin cells. The dermis itself is your hide. So if you want to think of that, if you were a cattle or something like that, the hide is basically the portion of a cow, once the cow has been killed, that makes leather. So if you got a pair of leather shoes, it came from the dermis of whatever animal it was made from. Most of the time it's going to be a steer or cow or something like that. So this area here is a strong, flexible connective tissue. It's made of fibroblast macrophages and white blood cells, mast cells. So that means anything that has gone past the epidermis, it is now in the dermis. It also has all of the blood vessels in there, and lymphatics and nerves. So although it has nerves and blood vessels, it basically is underneath the epidermis. And you're going to have some things that are in there, and they are things like the oil glands and the sweat glands, two things that are going to be responsible for maintaining homeostasis. Although this is not the lecture portion, this is just the lab portion, some of these are interesting. One of the things that your skin does have, particularly thick skin, so think of your palms and also the bottoms of your feet, they have little things called friction ridges. So if you put your hands in water for an extended period of time, you would see the friction ridges sticking out. And so if you're picking up cardboard boxes, those friction ridges will help you to grasp it. So although you don't want to always use your hand and you want to get a pair of gloves, you'll notice that a lot of gloves that are used to protect your hands will have in them little ridges of plastic, which will essentially help your gripping ability. In addition to these friction ridges, you're going to have sweat pores between them. And so the sweat pores, here is what you would have on somebody's fingers. So this is kind of a pattern. And so you can kind of see the pores in between the friction ridges. So if your hands or palms are sweaty, this is where the sweat is coming out of. That's going to enhance your gripping ability here with the sweat that's going to give it a little bit of extra ability to grip things. That's pretty much everything that we would cover in the lab portion. Whomever is teaching you the lecture, a lot of this is very, very interesting, and that's about all that you're going to be quizzed on when we get to the first lecture, or the first lab exam. So that's it.